Welcome all. You are about to hear a beautiful Aspen story with many layers, each one more amazing than the last. But to fully appreciate the beauty of the story, we all need to be grounded in the foundation of that story. And I know a lot of you heard Mike last night, but we know some of you have not seen the film, so we're going to assume limited knowledge. So Mike, as the creator, if you could take us back to the beginning and ground us in the Genesis story.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. The story starts in a really simple place. Shireen Ebadi, who's here, her and her husband had this amazing organization that would paint bedrooms for kids in Watts because they don't have a bed, they don't have a desk, they don't have the simple things. And I was struck by it. I was given the opportunity to do some work with them, and I was struck that rather than be painting, playgrounds, we were painting bedrooms. And the police would actually work security for when you brought things in and out to the homes. And I was given this really incredible opportunity to go out for a night and ride along in the back of a police car. I thought, okay, well, let's see how this goes. Should be pretty simple. And two things happened that were pretty transformative for me. One, I saw 3 people get shot and 1 guy died. I thought, wow, it's a lot more violent than I thought. But 2, and more importantly, I was talking to somebody who was a member of a gang, and I said, why'd you join the gang? He said, well, my mom had gotten a job, and she didn't want us to live here, and they offered free daycare and protection while she was working. And I realized I didn't understand both the level of violence, because what I had seen was not on the news that night, and I didn't understand the core reasons why. And so no intention of ever making a film or any produced product. I just went out at a venture capital background, and I bought 20 iPhones. And I gave 5 to gang members, 5 to police officers, priests, prostitutes, kids, whoever would take them. I asked about 200 people if they would participate, and ultimately we found 20 people to do the simple task that I asked was, film your life. Now, I thought, what's going to happen, right? We all know what's going to happen. It's going to be a disaster. And they turned in 200 hours of the craziest footage I had ever seen. The most raw, the most real. You were living in their home with them. You were walking to school with them. And for the first time, I was kind of seeing the reality in a very unfiltered way. And I thought, wow, there are all these learnings that came out of that process. How do they get shared? And certainly I was the wrong person to do that. I wasn't from there. I didn't know the community. I already knew. I didn't even know the story. And that's when we brought in others here in the Aspen Network. I had reached out. Shireen had put us in touch with Todd Lieberman, who's had a zillion films open up at the top of the film list. And we got on a Zoom call. He's going to talk about that later. I brought in Suzanne, and when I say brought in, I mean I begged her for weeks and weeks and weeks to watch this footage. And I reached out to Chris, who'd been a lifelong mentor of mine and somebody who was deeply interested in these issues. And we all started brainstorming, how would we do this? Like, what should it look like? And what emerged, and we'll get into detail about that later, is that they had to make the film themselves. We would build the infrastructure for them, but they had to build it themselves. Okay? And I thought, okay, well, now I'm off the hook, because there's no way this is going to happen. And over the course of the next year, and I want to show you what that looked like to us, Bloods, Crips, cops, mothers who'd had their children murdered by these gangs, women who'd been beat and homeless as a result of it, kids who were walking to school around dead bodies, others who'd been shot just living in the community, were sitting in the same room. And what they ended up doing is they had to review each other's 200 hours of footage. And I'm not going to say there was any forgiveness going on. There wasn't, right? But there was a sense of understanding and a sense of empathy began to come out of the group. So after a year of work, where we took on the role effectively of moderators, we'll talk about that in a bit. You don't see us anywhere. We basically took the Aspen Seminar methodology, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But we kind of stood back and we let them create their film. And they came to a rough cut, something they all agreed on. And we thought, uh-oh, now what are we going to do? We don't have anywhere to show it, and we don't even think anyone's going to care. And guess what they came up with? They said, it doesn't really matter. We're not worried about the other stuff. What if we go show it to the gang leaders? I was like, we can do that? And so for the first time in more than 30 years, they gathered up leadership from the largest gangs in Watts. This group had done more than 200 years in prison. And rather than debut at Sundance, we were in a warehouse. The police showed up. Principals from the school showed up. Everybody came together to watch it. And what came out of it was a great moment where they were all in the same room and it served as a mirror. They didn't necessarily love what they saw and they wanted to make it better. And rather than fighting, and rather than talking about the past or talking about all the things that could have been or why they were, they said, will you please show this to our most active gang members? So not the ones who've done 200 years in prison, the most active ones. And we did 5 or 6 additional screenings between them. And in the background, this level of understanding started to lead to a peace pledge of sorts, a new cultural standard, a way of understanding and electing how they were going to treat each other in this little 2-square-mile area. Now, to give you some context, in the 3 years that they filmed and edited, there were 100 homicides in this area. For the 6 months after, 0. By us getting out of the way and enabling them, and I want to draw a little parallel to something that we all had between us, which is we understood the Aspen seminar process. And it wasn't an ad, but it was a common language. Rather than read Plato, they read each other's lives through film. Rather than do Antigone, they made a rough cut. And rather than do it for the moderators, they did it for their community. And the outcome is just absolutely fantastic. Thank you. That's the story.
So other than 20 iPhones, what resources did you have available to you?
Literally none. We had plenty of headwinds, but literally none.
So did you have a budget?
No. I mean, this is the least expensive film ever made. I literally financed this out of my pocket, and it was the least expensive film ever made.
Did you have permission?
None. Not from the police, not from the gangs, not from the schools. This was all done underground and undercover.
Did you have a mandate?
Nothing.
Platform?
None.
But you did have one thing. You had, well, other than curiosity, you had the Aspen Institute experience.
We did.
So how valuable was that to this journey?
So one of the things, at the risk of sounding like a commercial, this project died 100 times. It died. And we had a group, as the group kept getting bigger and working together, but it died so many times. And it was an exercise in like rapid iteration, right? But you had a group of people who had a common mission, common cause, but we had very different skills, very different things, but we had the same vision for what a future could be. And despite every death this project had, repeatedly, we had a common language to work in and a common set of values.
So I don't know how many of you in the audience haven't seen it, but just in case, we're just going to show the quick 3-minute trailer just so you get a taste for the film if you haven't seen it. So, and there is violence, it is intense, but this is what the filmmakers chose to show to the world as an introduction to the movie. So if you could show the trailer, that would be great.
within LA County is Watts.
This area is home to more than 65 different gangs.
Cornelius is from Nickerson Gardens, Bounty Hunter Bloods. Tyrone's from Jordan Downs, Grape Street Crips. Those two housing projects have been at war for 40 years. And then to find them here at this table, how wild is this?
That's where I grew up at, right here.
Whether you're black, white, Asian, Mexican, when you come, you're gonna feel it. It's a dog-eat-dog world.
You just hear.
It is true what they say. It's a black neighborhood, no one gives a fuck. If we want it raw, it gotta be raw.
Don't sugarcoat it. This is Watts. This is what happened to us.
There's no words for a mama when her child is murdered.
You're trying to get a good night's sleep and you hear the helicopter.
We're taking huge chances for people. Questioning, right? Is it worth it?
This environment will bring the worst out of you, man, if you ain't strong.
They took my peace of mind. I can't trust nobody.
I'm not scared, I'm not shocked. I'm like, no.
We can't depend on nobody else to save Watts. If y'all want to save Watts, it starts within Watts. We Watts right here.
And we call this our silent march. Parents bring out their murdered loved one's shoes. These are little people, y'all.
I didn't have a father to show me how to be a father. He's everything. I'll make sure you know it. We can try to come up with a ceasefire.
Having everybody in that room together was kind of nerve-wracking.
My first concern was safety.
The potential for things to go sideways in that meeting was huge.
Like, we can't be in here saying we cool, you know what I'm saying, shake each other hand, whoop, and then we out in front of our homies to be.
And maybe this helps turn the knob just a little more towards less violence.
Could the area change? Could it become decent? Could these kids all see a future?
When kids play together, eat together, sleep together, they're not gonna be able to quick to kill one another. I forgive any one of my enemies to let my kids make it and grow up here to make Watts flourish.
It's about us developing new leaders.
Just putting our lives and reputation on the line.
Y'all put something together, brother, that's gonna go all over this world, and it's gonna promote peace. And it started right here in Watts.
So Suzanne, let's start with you. You've had a long career in media. You've interviewed 5 presidents, among many other achievements. What compelled you to finally say, yes, I'm going to work on this?
Well, Mike is right. He did ask me several times. But first of all, I mean, Obama or Clinton or any of those guys, Bush, they have nothing on these guys in Watts. I mean, their lives are boring compared to these guys. Mike started and he handed out the iPhones in December of 2021, and I think he reached out to me in January of 2022. And he told me that he was giving out these phones, or he had given out the phones, and he was just getting inundated with all of this video, all of this footage. And he's not lying when he says there were 200 hours of footage. It was just absolutely extraordinary. And so he asked me, as a friend, as a fellow with experience in media, to take a look and see, what did he have? Did he have anything? And so I spent many of my evenings with all of the filmmakers' lives, all of this video, all of this footage, in the evenings just watching hours and hours and taking copious notes. And it was several months later, Mike and I met in LA, and it was at the pool in a hotel, and he says, by his story, that he got burnt in the sun and he was miserable. I was tanning, it was lovely. But he was shocked because I'm a journalist, so I had copious handwritten notes. I had pages and pages and pages of notes. So I'm not really sure Mike knew what to do with that. And we had a really great first conversation. And he wanted to know what we had, or what he had. And I told him, I said, you know, this is just so rare and so unique and so special and delicate and fragile and in great need of protection and dignity, all of these things. I mean, people's souls and lives were really in his hands. And this was, you know, they took us through their neighborhoods, through their homes. They introduced us to their families and their schools, and they told the most raw and tragic stories. They gave us the highs as well as the lows. And so, you know, I told him it was just beautiful and very, very rare. And it was months after that, when I left the network, that he brought me on in a more formal capacity to work with him. And we ended up meeting. My role was, as a storyteller, was to basically stay out of the way and just observe and learn about what was important to this group, to these group of filmmakers, because it was their story to tell, which was very challenging for me, right? And which is what I did. And one of the rules was really, you know, they were doing a beautiful job of filming. And the rule was, yeah, stay out of the way and just listen, just listen. I broke that rule once, I mean, a couple of times, but in watching the hours and hours, specifically of Cornelius early on, and he was always kind of, you know, for those of you who didn't see it, he was one of the gang members, but he was always laid back and cool and, you know, completely put together and with the shades on. And I saw this rare piece of footage where his sunglasses, he didn't have his sunglasses on, and I was like, oh my God, he has the most beautiful eyes, gorgeous eyes. And so when I first met Cornelius for the first time, I told him, I said, look, whatever you do when you're filming, take off your sunglasses. I want to see those gorgeous eyes. Mike knows I'm a little obsessed with this. But it was, you know, it was that truth and that authenticity that really stood out when we met.
Was there a particular moment in this entire process when you said, wow, we have something special here?
That happened early on. And one of the things that Mike insisted, and it was an odd way to make a film, was the Aspen Institute way of doing things, right? Of having those really tough, hard conversations. And early on, the very first gathering of the filmmakers, Mike had set out the table. It was kind of in a round shape. He gave out notebooks for people to take notes. Took it, you know, it was very serious, took it very seriously and led the charge. And there were things that were happening in that very first meeting. So that was the meeting that Nisi, who had been beaten by Cornelius's gang, they met on the, you know, a sidebar conversation, a smoke break, lunch, whatever, and he apologized for his gang's responsibility in her beating. There was another situation where one of the police officers, I think it was Tim, who had a little joke going on with Cornelius about being arrested. And then you have the students, these young women, and they were they looked very afraid and meek, and it was really hard to get them to talk. Now, you wouldn't know that seeing the film now, because they're like the most vocal in the film, but that's how it all started. And we shot that very first interaction kind of like a boardroom meeting, right? There was one camera, and it was just straight on. And we missed a lot. I think we missed a lot in the video because beautiful things were happening. This dynamic was happening right before our eyes, and we hadn't really captured it. And that's when Mike had decided, we had decided to start shooting the process, right? To actually see what was happening at the table, because it was beautiful and raw and angry and emotional, and the kinds of conversations that were happening and the relationships that were being built in that format had to be a part of the story. We realized that that was key to what we were doing, and it really changed the dynamic and the focus of the film.
Thank you for all you have done.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Shireen, you are essentially person zero in the Healthy Room Project.
It's better than patient zero.
Yes, definitely. Tell us about that project and how it catalyzed the whole, why we're here today.
So as I was thinking about this, because I knew that question was coming, I know that's shocking, it almost sounds like I'm making this up, so I'll just put that out there. 2015, I was an FBI agent. I was working as an FBI agent. My husband was a cop in a different part of Los Angeles, and we were volunteering in Watts. There's an officer, Johnny Coughlin, who was mentioned last night, who was really pivotal in bringing us there. He ran an organization there, and so at first we were just coaching volleyball and things like that, but organically through that we met a number of young students who, were excelling in school, and yet we learned from being in their homes they literally did not have beds to sleep in. Some sleeping just on the floor, some with like the little foam egg crates, multiple kids in a room, 2-bedroom projects, housing developments, whatever we want to call them. They would do their homework after midnight when their parents went to bed, and they can go into the living room and turn on the light. They didn't have fans, it's extraordinarily hot, and they never left their rooms except to go to school and come home. And my husband and I were like, well, we can solve this problem immediately, like the immediate need, right? And so we literally took them and we bought beds and bedding for the people that were in the room and some storage and a desk and a chair. And it didn't feel like we weren't starting a movement. We didn't intend to start a nonprofit. We were literally just meeting the needs of these kids who, it made no sense to me that they could get up after all of that and then go to school and do really well, and then we expect them to just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go to college and make a difference. It just didn't make sense in my brain, and it was something little we could do. And so that was 2015, and also in 2015, which is the part that sounds like I'm making this up, Mike had prompted me to come to an executive leadership seminar here at Aspen. I didn't know what the Aspen Institute was. I'd never been to Aspen. Like I said, I was a knuckle dragger. I mean, this was not on my radar of things. It wasn't like I was in a leadership position. I was just a standard agent. And I met Todd Lieberman. He was in my cohort. And we became friends and stayed friends over the years. And in fact, Todd came, he lives in Los Angeles, and so we brought him to Watts. And the girl Maryland in the film, if you've seen the film, the boxer in the film, was one of the first rooms that we redid. And there's a picture of Todd and his beautiful wife, Heather, who I hope is here, and his 2 amazing children who came and hung out in Gonzac Village, which is one of the housing projects, and played with Maryland and her sister Araceli. Like, I remember the kids playing like soccer in the front yard as we were redoing the room. And it was a really beautiful experience. And so 2015 is really where Aspen and Watts like collided in my husband and mine's world. And then you just sort of fast forward, because we brought Mike to Watts also, and then Mike met Johnny Coughlin, and then we went on this ride along, and then Mike has this idea, and I actually had dinner with Todd and his wife and told him about Mike's insane, crazy idea that I was really actually kind of joking when I told him, because I was like, oh, he's gonna make this movie, he's gonna hand out iPhones, and very cynically, I was like, probably not gonna get the iPhones back, and just being perfectly honest, that was my response. And Todd's immediate response, because he is creative and talented and sees the beauty in things, he said, this is the best idea I have ever heard. And he kind of stood up from his chair. I'll never forget, you were across from me and you were like, the best idea I have ever heard. And I'm like, huh, I clearly don't know art. So I introduced Todd to Mike, and introduced Johnny to Mike, and then Johnny and my husband came out and Johnny has this amazing amount of trust in the community and was able to connect all the other filmmakers. And so really I was just kind of that person pushing that first domino, but for Aspen and but for Johnny and Watts, I'm not sure we would be here today. So thank you.
So you take this executive seminar. You take this executive seminar, now a finance fellow, I have to say. You take this executive seminar, you meet Todd, you set up this Zoom, the 3 of you on Zoom. Like, tell that story of that moment as well. And I want to hear it from Todd after as well, once you tell the story.
We'll see if it matches.
Testing my memory. Well, Todd's very practical, but also very passionate, and this is what he does. I mean, if you Google him, if you don't know him, you're going to be shocked at the movies that he's made. And so he offered his time, and he offered his knowledge, and he was offering all of this to Mike purely based on the fact that Aspen Connection / I'm vouching, which is just shocking. I mean, the level of trust that you had in me to even take that call, and then to allow Tony, who was your assistant, to essentially spend the vast majority of 4 years working on this is stunning. And in that call, I mean, this didn't always start well. It wasn't as good of a movie the first time around. No offense, but the film, there were some rough cuts, put it that way. So God bless all these people that,
There were many iterations.
Many iterations. Yeah, so I mean, I just think it was this beautiful amount of trust that he had to even take the call. I mean, Todd is a busy person who makes giant movies, and we're on a Zoom talking about handing out iPhones in Watts. It just sort of blows the mind, if you will.
Because of an executive seminar.
Because of an executive seminar.
Todd?
I'm here. I was thinking about Aspen, and Shireen's right. I mean, that seminar was transformative for me. And I remember at the end of the seminar, they had us write a letter to ourselves and kind of outlining what you learned during the course of the seminar, and then 6 months or a year later, they'd mail it to you. And I remember my letter, reading it, and it was like, life isn't binary. It's ebbs and flows, and you ride the wave, right? And so when we met Marilyn, and I'd made a movie called The Fighter, and I brought her a movie poster for The Fighter, and she's a boxer, and we were introduced to the city of Watts in this way. By the way, Johnny Coughlin drove us there, and he was like driving 8,000 miles an hour. I was like, man, you drive faster. They said, you gotta go fast here. And when this idea was pitched, now granted, I am not a documentary filmmaker. When we were in this Aspen seminar, there were 2 movies that I was desperate to make. And I'd come to the realization after the course of, at that point, it was 20-year career or whatever, that I make stories because I like making people feel good. That's the reason I do it. Now, you might Google me like Chris suggested and be like, well, that one didn't make me feel good. Now, I try on as many as I can, okay? I try on as many as I can. But there were 2 movies that I wanted to make, and I pitched them at the seminar. One was a movie called Wonder, based on a book about a child with a facial difference. And another was a movie called Stronger, which is a movie about a young man whose legs were blown off during the Boston Marathon bombing. So when this idea was presented to me, now, I had never made a documentary in my life. What I do know is that when I have an emotional reaction to something, when I initially understand that there's something very special there, that was the reaction I had here. How the process goes forward, I had no idea. Absolutely no idea. Nor did I have any understanding of how to make a documentary. Now, since I have made a few documentaries, and normally what happens is in a scripted movie, you work on the script, you know exactly what the story is, and then you figure out what the budget is and go make the movie. In a documentary, you generally have an idea of what the subject is. We're doing a documentary on the American Basketball Association with Dr. J. That's pretty clear. We're doing a documentary on the band Def Leppard. That's pretty clear. But a documentary about, we're going to do something in Watts and hand a bunch of people phones. Well, I don't know what that is, but you know what? That sounds amazing. What ended up happening for me, I felt like my role in this was twofold. And this group here is just stunningly amazing and impressive. Like Suzanne said, like Mike said, it wasn't our story. It's their story. That we had to stay out of the way. And 2, I knew that there was a reason for it to exist. I just didn't know exactly what it was. I knew that we had something, the potential for something beautiful. And I'm going to give a lot of props to Tony, who was mentioned earlier, who spent day in and day out on this. When the stories kept coming in and the cuts kept coming in, it was heart-wrenching, it was heartbreaking, it was enlightening, it was beautiful, it was tragic. But what changed for me and what clicked in of, oh, this is why we did it, was when the peace started happening. And when people started talking to each other and those meetings started happening, I was like, wow, that's the reason this existed.
That's a beautiful catalyst story. It's what inspired you. But now that we're closer to the end of the journey and we've been on this many years, why do you look at it now and say, wow, this is such a compelling story?
Look, I was saying this to Chris earlier, as a filmmaker, and we all watch movies on our phones and we all watch movies at home, but there's a difference when you watch it with a group of people. And I think, sitting in that theater yesterday, we've all seen this movie many times. Nobody has seen it besides us and the gang leaders and some of the police. When you're in that room and you have that communal experience of shared emotion, shared understanding, it's contagious. And I believe that this has the opportunity to propel empathy, especially when people are watching it together. If we're crying together, we want to take action together.
So coming out of the movie, coming out of the documentary last night, I heard a lot of people say, Hollywood would never make this movie. I'd love your reaction to that.
I agree with them.
And why do you think that is?
Look, how much time do we have? I've been in this business, the Hollywood business, for 30 years, and I've seen an extraordinary amount of change during the course of it. Without getting too into the weeds, telling stories that have a purpose and that the goal isn't financial is normally where my business is. Now, hopefully, the fact that there is a purpose yields a financial result. What's ended up happening in the business of Hollywood is that that's been reversed. And financial is first, and if it has a reason for it, that's secondary. So these kinds of films, which I believe have an extraordinary amount to say, and also have an extraordinary amount of potential profitability, in this case for the community of Watts and the people, which, by the way, that was another thing that was very important to me. We take no money for this, right? This is a pro bono exercise. The money will be going back into the community for the people. It's hard. It's hard in Hollywood. So, you know, we have an independent studio here, a financier named Michael Sunan, who is now going to. He's the Hollywood of Aspen.
Thank you.
All right, Stix. Not a fellow yet. Not a fellow yet.
Hey.
So I'm in London having dinner with a bunch of Aspen fellows, and one of them from the Finance Leaders Fellowship starts telling me about this amazing project. Like, she goes, you won't believe it. There's this project going on in Watts where they're handing out iPhones, not realizing I'm fully aware of the project. But I said, well, how are you connected? How do you know about this? And she's like, oh, I'm working with this amazing person, Stix. He's the best. And he's doing the music for the documentary. So if you could just quickly talk about your relationship to MasterCard and how you're connected to the Aspen community.
So MasterCard is one of the most, first thing, let's set the record straight. Everybody say, what's up? Got to get the energy right first. So MasterCard is one of the most amazing partners I've ever had. I have a foundation called Think Watts Foundation, and we've been working with MasterCard for 4 years, doing entrepreneurship programming, et cetera, et cetera. And there was a individual who's a fellow Crown.
Finance fellow.
Sorry, I'm getting it right.
She was in our executive leadership class.
Salah Goss. Yeah. And it's funny because I get a text message. I'm in the studio, which I got 4 kids, but anyhow, we'll get to that next. I'm in the studio and I get it. Hey, do you know a Chris? I was like, oh yeah, Chris, Michael Sunan. And like, what? Wait, how do you know them? Or who? They're working on the project with me. And so she was like, well, they're talking about the documentary you told me about. And this is amazing. These are some amazing individuals who I think can bring something valuable to the community of Watts. And just that whole ecosystem of MasterCard, Salah, and that opportunity was just an amazing chance to see what would come from that. But before you ask the next question, I want to get into what you're probably going to ask me. Guess what? I want to address something. Mike said something. He said, I didn't have no resources, but he had a lot of risk. He almost he could have got his head knocked off. And what that means in the neighborhood is you could have got yourself into trouble, right? But he was courageous enough to go do it. That's why I salute him, and I'm thankful for him for having courage and curiosity, right? So let me be honest. Let me share some honesty now. I said no 100 times to Mike because let me reenact the moment. Ring. Hello. Oh my God, Stix. Whoa, slow down. What's going on? There's a white guy in the neighborhood and he's giving out phones and he's gonna film people fighting and stop it. Do whatever you can. Okay, give me his number. Ring. Mike. Stix, oh my God, I've been trying to reach out to you. You gotta do this. I got this project. We gave out iPhones. I said, no way. If you do this, I'm gonna call every lawyer I know to shut this down. Because I wanted to protect my community. There was a documentary in Watts called A Week in Watts, and it was the worst thing ever displayed about my community, and I'm so passionate about where I come from. So I wasn't gonna it wasn't about race, it wasn't about anything, but it was about protection over my community. And if someone is calling me, 3 people called me and told me about this, and I told Mike no, at least realistically 3 times. But it was Mike's conviction. It was Mike's sincerity. It was Mike's passion he told me these exact words, I'll never forget it. He said, I won't do this unless you're involved. Because that's the problem that everyone gets wrong, is they try to tell people how to get it done. But I want you to tell me how to get it done. And I'll share this last piece. So, a couple years later, after I said no a bunch of times, I get a phone call from the same person who called me frantically. And they said, Stix, I wanted to talk to you about the documentary. I said, oh, what'd he do? What's going on? She said, no, you need to look at it. You need to check out what's there. I called Mike. Mike, send me the documentary. Let me see what's going on. Keep in mind, there's no music, there's no nothing. So he sends it to me. I send it to my partner, Savalas. He hit me an hour and 30 minutes later on the dot and said, oh my God, it's riveting. I said, riveting? I haven't heard that word since Dark Knight. I'm like, did 50 turn into Batman? Like, what's going on? So I check it out. I watched it with my wife. I cried 6 times because I seen my story over and over, getting shot, robbed, abuse. I seen my story. So I called Mike back instantly. I said, Mike, let's do this. What do you need? And the rest is history.
So we have the Aspen connection. It's all about enlightened leadership. So we have to ask the question, what are the leadership lessons here? What can you share with this beautiful audience about what you learned about leadership in this process?
I'd say the one thing that for me, and I'd almost lost the willingness to leap without looking. To just get started without having an end in mind and letting it just go. Now, because we were the least expensive film ever made, we had the benefit of time. We didn't have an ending, and frankly, no one thought we would ever see the light of day anyway. And so there were several times along the way where, keeping our hand off the project and letting them take us on this journey, was hard. We all had moments, and I think one of the disciplines we had in this group was anytime someone tried to put a hand on it, probably the best thing we did was knock that hand off and really give the community the chance to craft it in their own way. Hyper-adaptability would be the other one for me. Getting started without an ending, and then this was not about, we never thought anyone was going to, homicides there was no goal. It was just, remember my experience, like moms put kids in gangs and I didn't understand why. We just wanted to get closer to the truth. And we never thought anybody would see it. If we'd have started out saying, we want a 90% drop in homicides, which is the story for the last year, we would have had different answers, different approaches, and it wouldn't have worked.
I would say leadership really comes from listening, and learning comes from listening. And that is a discipline and an exercise that is so important. And so I learned so much from the filmmakers because I sat with them and listened and learned about what was important to each one of them, what was important to the community, and what needed to be told, what needed to get out of the film, and all the various iterations, because it was a process that, you know, this has been 3.5 years. I'm a breaking news gal, so that was a little frustrating. I was like, 3.5 years. But the time was required, and one of the things about leadership is really learning how to get someone to trust you and earn that trust. And I think that was an exercise when we looked at the filmmakers and what they were doing around the table, you could learn from, because they did that themselves. And we were just the co-moderators. So we're watching this unfold before our eyes. And that was very enlightening. That was very inspiring for me. And to back up Mike's point too, I mean, it wasn't all like flowers and roses and bunnies and all that, because, you know, we saw them deal with some very hard conversations, tough stuff. They dealt with racism, they dealt with classism, violence, trauma, grief. And so we had some tough conversations ourselves, right? Because we all brought our own biases to the table. And we needed to also kind of check our own biases and learn from each other, but learn from the group that was right in front of us. And I thought that was quite incredible. We had these, you know, Zoom calls that were going, and we were able to really put that aside and to learn from each other and to have them tell the story. But it came from them. We learned from them.
I would say 3 things. One, like 3 different styles of leadership. So there was Mike's. He's a CEO, he's a venture capital guy and private equity guy, and vision, execution, adaptability, and resilience. Like he said, this project died many times. And even now, like, there are people that probably are trying to kill it. So resilience, and that was really impressive to watch. The second I would say is the filmmakers. I mean, I'm in awe of the risk that they took, the courage that they showed, the vulnerability that they were willing to put on display to a bunch of people they have never met before. And they showed up. And these are people that showed up. And the last one I would say is, to your point on trust, Johnny Coughlin is a servant leader, and he is, I call him a saint. He refuses to accept that term, but he is truly a servant leader, and he was able to go to filmmakers, like almost every filmmaker that's here either came directly because of a relationship with him or one degree of separation. And that is stunning. I mean, he is a white Irish cop that works in the hood for the last 20, 30 years. I mean, that he has built that trust in the community tells me a lot about his leadership skills, and that's what I learned from him.
You know that phrase, how you do anything is how you do everything? That's how I feel about this project. And I feel like part of my role was Dr. No, in that every couple months I'd get a call from Shireen saying, Michael met some so-and-so who's really wealthy in Aspen. They want, no. Michael met this person that, no. It's this group. We keep it inside the group. This politician, nope. We did not let anybody inside the circle until, now I'm going to reference another thing. You know that Head and Shoulders commercial? You never get a second chance to make a first impression? That's this one here. And so eventually, in spite of all of these things coming at us, these opportunities, financial, political, we stayed true to the original intent, the original goal, and didn't fall prey to those potential influences. And then, yesterday, when we showed the film, we're now ready.
I'm going to answer that, Chris, with I'm about to butcher it a little bit, so bear with me. A Winston Churchill quote. Winston Churchill said, "If you earn, you can make a living, but if you give, you can change a life." That's leadership. That quote that I just altered and made it our own, because that's what Watts does. We take things and we make it our own and grow it to be something incredible, is what Chris, Mike, Suzanne, Shireen, Todd represent. And they understood one more word that I felt like I learned this week here in Aspen, and that's the lesson of being selfless. In every session I've been in, there was an amazing abundance of human beings who all embody selflessness. And when I met these individuals, though my ego told me to not let it happen, I became selfless and allowed the universe to flow. And when you allow the universe to flow, amazing things manifest. So that's what I learned.
I want to add one thing to this because it happened in this room. 10 years ago, Brian Stevenson spoke to us. I think the greatest moment in the history of the Action Forum. It changed so many people, and I have to say it was a driver for me and many of us when we talked about it. And for those of you that don't know Brian, he was a lawyer that got children off of death row. And I'll give you a couple quotes from him from that day. "Each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done." And really apropos here, if we're going to make the world a better place, we've got to change how we deal with people who are different from us. But what made him very compelling was he didn't just say, do good things. He said, do these 4 things. And he just went down the list. And they were, get proximate, change narratives, stay hopeful, and do uncomfortable things. And I'd like to believe that that moment 10 years ago is a line that went through the Aspen Institute that got us to get proximate. Mike said, stay hopeful. Change the story, change the narratives, and do uncomfortable things. So I just want to recognize that moment 10 years ago right here in this room. So there's so many more questions, but in the interest of time, where are we now? Mike, take us to where we are now, and then Stix, you're going to talk about the music, so get ready.
And I want to build on one of the leadership things and the uncomfortable thing. I mean, yes, walking into a warehouse with a bunch of gang members, right, that was scary. But I want to talk about the bravery, that's me, of some of the things that the team had done, meaning the filmmakers themselves. What really gave me joy was they adopted getting this film done. And I'm going to give you one concrete example of how close this was, one of the 100 ways it nearly died. For those of you who saw the film, you actually see the crime scene footage. Rapati, you see Nisi getting beat, you see Sean getting that. Well, police don't give you that. Police who care about the truth might sneak that out. And now we have footage in a film, but now we need to get approval from an organization that may not want to approve it. Supportive, but may not want to approve it. And when you're in a jam, and there's been changes of leaderships, and they're like, no, 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 it's getting killed, it's getting killed. Guess who might, if they really believe in it, change their minds? Gang leaders called the police and said, we're at peace. If you don't approve it, we can't guarantee that's going to be the case. And they fought to get their own crimes in a film. That's leadership. In terms of where are we now, you know, what's amazing to me, and we are so grateful, no film festival would show this. 3.5 years of work, you were the first people to ever say we'd be honored to see it. Everybody said no. Okay? And what was amazing along the way is that despite all these challenges, one thing we learned was how important music was. Okay? And you're going to hear, we're going to go out, we have some events coming and other things, but I'd like Stix, who after 2.5 years, I said, do your thing, took what we thought was done and has taken it to a place we never imagined. Stix?
I'm gonna stand up for this. You know, I gotta talk my, you know what I'm saying? We gotta, we're talking about the music. How many people felt the impact of the music watching the film yesterday? Right. So that music is, you know, Chris and Mike and the whole team and everybody here are saying Stix made the music, but really the filmmakers made the music. It was an expression of what I felt watching the story, living the story. We treated every single scene like it was its own movie because living the life in Watts is a movie. So everything is in regards to the music is inspired by the souls of Watts. So I wanted to capture that and make sure that everyone who witnessed that score felt that. Now, this is a you hear it first. Mike will be like, Stix, but I'm like, I got the mic now. Turn their mics off. No, but we have a soundtrack as well that will go with the documentary that have artists that have over 85 Grammy nominations and wins on this project. Over 200 million monthly listeners combined on this album. We got artists like, y'all can't tell nobody, dog. I don't even like saying names, but we got artists like Doechii. We got artists like Kehlani, Janae Aiko, there's Mary Mary, there's Rhapsody, there's Layla Hathaway, there's the legendary Leon. I'll go on and on. I'm gonna let y'all gotta listen to it to find out. But one very important, you hear it first again before we get into a sneak peek of that song. If you didn't hear it yesterday at the end of the song, we're gonna play it again, but there's a very, you hear it first. Y'all ready for this information? LA premiere. Be there, be square, rectangle, circle, or triangle. Peacock Theater. Live orchestral section. Get nice, get cute, because it's going down. It will be the LA premiere for the Nothing to See Here documentary. And that will be at the Peacock. And next year, it's already confirmed, because we did a deal. Don't tell nobody. With AEG and Golden Voice, and we will have a benefit concert at the Crypto Arena as well. So, if you really want to show some support for Watts, come on down it. No, I'm just playing. I'm just get back in my Watts bag. But now, without further ado,
could I add something to it?
Of course, sure.
Just one thing before we go. I want to add one thing. Money doesn't matter, but what I thought was brilliant about what he had done, like totally brilliant, is he got the artist to donate the royalties from the album to go to the foundation that will be managed by the filmmakers. And what that creates is Bloods, Crips, cops, victims, change agents in that community will now be working together, not having to ask for money, but having earned it from their film, from the music, and an entire community of artists who've stepped forward and said, we want to help, and this is how they're helping.
And I'm glad you said that. Oh, go ahead, Chris, sorry.
Before you cue it, I'd love, without saying the name, like tell the story, how hard it was to get. But when the music is playing, we'd love the entire Watts team to come up and stage. Yes. So please join us.
Thank you, Chris. So this song we're about to play was extremely difficult to execute. And I'll tell you why. Mike had a vision and he came to me and he was like, Stix, we need a song that embodies what this whole message is about. We need it to be heartfelt. We needed to, translate what we trying to say. We want people to feel. So I said, all right, let me think about it. And I felt like I picked the right song to cover that says everything we needed to say. But here's the difficult part. I wanted to do something courageous, just like all of the filmmakers, all of my homies, my friends, brothers, and sisters did, filming their lives. I needed to do something courageous with this song. I needed to do something courageous like Chris, Mike, Suzanne, Shireen, Todd, Mark, Karunchik, Johnny, everybody that's a part of it. You know, I wanted to do something courageous, so I came up with an idea. I said, I'm gonna grab kids from every single housing project in Watts. They had never recorded a song before, never been in the studio, let alone even come together, because if one thing I need y'all to really, really understand is that Nickerson Gardens, Jordan Downs, Imperial Courts, Avalon Gardens, Gonzaga, Hacienda Circles, all of that, you don't cross the borders. That was in one of the readings. They were talking about borders, right? Paying attention. Great reading. You don't cross the borders because it's dangerous. So, but I said, fuck it, let's get curious, let's get courageous. So we got all of the kids from all of the housing projects, and we brought them to the studio, and we turned them into the Watts Kids Choir. And we made this song right here. Go ahead and hit play.
Well, I just want to, I want to thank y'all, leave y'all with something. My word is dream. I'm a dreamer, and I'm in a room full of dreamers. And I had something else to say, but I met 3 young ladies today. Y'all inspired me. I was living in my son's dream. Y'all made me back dreaming. The words y'all gave me today. I would do everything to help y'all. Like we said, we live in California together. I want y'all to keep dreaming. This gonna come true. Thank y'all for making me dream.
I just want to say one thing on behalf, a message to them that's very important. They keep telling us over and over that you've given them a gift. You're the gift. I mean, you're the gift, all of us. So thank you to the entire team. Thank you to everybody. Great job. Thank you.